The white wedding dress, reflecting the sunlight against the blue sky and sea of Florida, stands out beautifully. The bride, dressed in that white gown, looks like a princess straight out of a fairy tale. It's truly frightening to think that this adorable-looking woman turned out to be a monster that would make even a witch shudder. My name is Sarah. I'm a housewife in my late 50s, nothing out of the ordinary. I have a daughter and a son, but both are independent and have their own families now. While I felt relieved after finishing raising my kids, I almost fell into a slump. To avoid that, I'm saving up for a trip around the US with my husband, helping him with his work. My husband, who's almost 60, is the president of a construction company. He always says,
"I don't know what to do if I retired."
So being the workaholic he is, it looks like he'll keep working even after he turns 60. We're a couple who needs a goal to focus our energy on, otherwise, we just have too much time on our hands. Life has been peaceful and calm, but lately, there's been a bit of a problem.
Hi, Sarah. I had some free time, so I thought I'd drop by.
Oh, hi, Rachel.
Despite her cheerful greeting, my smile twitches. I should be grateful that my son's wife came to visit.
Hello, there's not much here, but please, come on in.
Sure thing.
She smiled sweetly with her cute face as she walked in. As usual, she snapped photos of the guest room and decor with her phone on the way to the living room.
Oh, really? Ordinary chocolate chip cookies? I wish there were something more Insta-worthy.
When I served the chocolate chip cookies I got from my friend, she puffed her cheeks. All right, you're adorable, I get it. I remember thinking back to when my daughter was a picky little girl, and I'd often find myself saying,
"If you don't like it, you don't have to eat it."
Oh, if only she weren't someone else's daughter, I'd give her a piece of my mind.
I'm sorry about that, but these are actually pretty popular with young people too.
Oh, really? Well, I guess they're kinda cute if you look closely.
Rachel picked up one of the cookies and started adjusting the angle of the plate and cup, snapping several photos. Watching her, I stuffed a cookie in my mouth, swallowing my words. 6 months ago, my eldest son got married. That's when Rachel, my daughter-in-law, came into the picture. They apparently met at the reception desk of the university hospital where my son, Andrew, works as a new doctor. I was surprised when I first met her. She was so tall, with long limbs and a small face, and her big, round eyes made her look adorable. My husband was also impressed, saying,
"Kids these days look like dolls."
Andrew was completely smitten with his cute, delicate, and seemingly vulnerable wife. The only one who wasn't impressed was my daughter, Mary, who had married earlier. She muttered,
"Andrew has terrible taste in women."
And I scolded her for it. I think I understand what she meant. Ever since Rachel quit her job after getting married, she's been visiting our house every week. She'd always come alone, and not with Andrew. Just hearing that, one might think she is a sweet daughter-in-law who cherishes her mother-in-law. Yet, it doesn't seem like she's coming to see me, her mother-in-law. From her behavior, it's clear that she's quite taken with this house. Even during our initial meeting before the wedding, she was wide-eyed with wonder, saying,
Wow! This is like a movie.
Our home, which is now 50 years old, may be showing its age, but it's a large, modern-style house that incorporates the best techniques and trends from its time. The grand spiral staircase is quite impressive, and because my husband often entertains clients here, we've put a lot of thought into the art we display. I'm genuinely pleased when people compliment our home. However, there's something unsettling about Rachel's excessive fascination. Every time she visits, she takes photos, wanders around the house on her own, and even lounges on the sofa as if she owns the place. It feels a bit disrespectful, especially since she's only recently married into the family. I wonder if all young people are like this nowadays. Even so, the young women who work at my husband's company are much more polite, and even if it's just for show, they still treat me with respect as someone older than them. There have been times when I've thought about correcting her behavior, but I worry about being disliked as the mother-in-law, so I've been unsure how to approach it. Then one day, when my husband came home early, he unexpectedly encountered Rachel, and since our son was on a night shift, the three of us ended up having dinner together. Perhaps because my husband was present, Rachel didn't take any photos and was relatively well behaved during the meal, making for a peaceful evening. However, while we were enjoying our after-dinner coffee, Rachel dropped a bombshell.
So, Dad, when do you plan to pass this house on to Andrew?
I nearly spit out my coffee at her blunt question. My husband, unaware of her obsession with the house, simply looked puzzled and replied,
Ah. This house is going to be inherited by our daughter.
What?
Rachel's face froze in shock at his unexpected response. However, she quickly recovered and, leaning forward, began to argue with my husband.
But traditionally, the eldest son inherits the family home. This is crazy.
My husband calmly replied,
Our son became a doctor, and our daughter, who will take over my company with her husband, is set to inherit this house. Besides, this house actually belongs to my wife.
What?
Rachel looked at me with disbelief. Since my husband had spilled the beans, I had no choice but to explain.
This house was built by my grandfather. He also founded my husband's construction company.
This house was constructed when my grandfather's business began to take off. It was designed to be luxurious and modern for its time, with elements of an open house, so it turned out quite grand. Later, my father inherited both the house and the company, but neither my sister nor I were interested in construction. Therefore, I had an arranged marriage with my husband, who was the second son of a friend's construction firm, and he took over the business. Even after this explanation, Rachel seemed unwilling to accept it and started to whine like a child.
But it's normal for the eldest son to inherit the house.
We spent a lot of money sending our son to a private medical school, so that should be enough. He understands this, so there's no problem. Besides, this house is partly for entertaining business clients.
But
This house is built with a steel frame, but it's old, so maintaining it is a lot of work. I'm sure our son will build a wonderful home that suits both of you.
Neither my husband's calming words nor my reassurances seemed to reach her.
I want this house. I already told everyone that we're going to live here.
Ignoring our kindness, she continued to push her own selfish desires. I finally lost my temper and raised my voice.
Know your place and have some shame. This house, and we are not here to satisfy your vanity. This is not your family home, it's your marital home. Do you understand?
Rachel, hearing me scold her for the first time, bit her lip in silence, likely out of shock and frustration. Then, without a word, she walked out of the house.
See, I told you, Andrew has no sense when it comes to women.
The next day, when Mary heard what had happened, she was fuming.
Come on, he's always been a quiet, studious kid, so he probably didn't have much experience talking to girls.
But there were good girls around him, weren't there? Like Emily or Emily.
Yes, I think Emily was probably the only female friend he had.
Emily is a childhood friend of Andrew, a woman who lives nearby. She was the class president type, always looking out for others, and often helped Andrew, who was tall but gentle and often a target for bullies. He trusted Emily deeply, and even now, as adults, they still keep in touch. She is tall, with sharp eyes and a strong-willed nature. Completely the opposite of Rachel.
Emily is a good girl. I would have felt so relieved if he had chosen someone like her.
Exactly.
Mary leaned forward excitedly.
But Emily has the right to choose too, you know. Besides, Andrew chose Rachel, so it can't be helped. I just hope she reflects on what happened and calms down a bit.
Rachel is 24 years old and the youngest among 3 siblings with 2 older brothers whose age are apart. I noticed at the wedding that she seemed to be very doted on by both her parents and brothers. Hence, I decided to overlook her slight spoiled and naive behavior, hoping she'd learn and grow over time. I thought I was being patient and understanding. Yet, she turned out to be more of a monster than I had imagined.
Hello, Sarah.
2 weeks after that incident, Rachel showed up on a weekday afternoon, unannounced. Beside her was a man I didn't recognize. I thought she had come to apologize, but that didn't seem to be the case.
Rachel, who is this?
Mrs. Anderson, nice to meet you. I'm Mike Smith from the Clover Limited Liability Partnership.
The man, with his neatly combed hair and black-rimmed glasses, handed me a business card. Sure enough, the card read, Attorney at Law, Mike Smith. Attorney at Law, Clover LLP.
And what brings an attorney to my home?
Well, your daughter-in-law here informed me that this house might be an illegal structure. As an attorney, I couldn't just overlook something like that.
What?
An illegal structure? Rachel jumped in, her face full of faux concern.
Andrew told me. I was so shocked to hear that you might have done something wrong.
Huh?
I could only manage a dumbfounded response, having no idea what she was talking about. I didn't know what Andrew had told her about the house, but one thing was clear. It seems likely that she has misunderstood Andrew's words. Yet, she stood there with malicious intent. Even I had reached the end of my patience. Since she is the wife my dear son chose, I wanted to treat her with respect. However, if she wanted to pick a fight with me, I'd give her one.
I'm sorry. I'm so shaken by the sudden visit from an attorney. May I record this conversation? I want to make sure I listen carefully to it later.
I asked, my voice trembling as if I were scared because my crime had been exposed.
By all means.
Mr. Smith nodded pompously, so I pulled out my phone and pressed the record button.
So, Mr. Smith, what should I do?
If it's against the law, you'll need to face the penalties and promptly renovate.
Renovate.
Well, I suppose some people think it's necessary to correct any legal violations.
And then, you should hand over the house to this young lady.
What?
How does that make any sense? That logic is completely off the rails. I was genuinely shocked.
Why should I do that?
We can't allow someone who disregards the law to continue living here. It would be more fitting for someone as pure-hearted as this young lady to reside in this house.
Sarah, I'll make this house even more beautiful.
Rachel grasped my hand, her eyes misty but with a smug expression on her face. Ah, I see. That's what this is all about.
Therefore, please proceed with the following renovations. Here's the agreement.
I see.
I looked over the so-called agreement. I could understand the need for modifications if something was indeed violating the law, though the wording seems far too vague. Still, installing a brand new kitchen, bathtub, and toilet? That's just too much. I couldn't help but mentally scoff. They must have drafted this agreement while Googling legal terms. For all the formal language, the content was utterly absurd. I couldn't believe they had the nerve to present such a poorly crafted document. They're definitely going to regret this later.
I understand what you're saying.
So then,
But I'm not handing over this house.
Why not?
Rachel glared at me with a fierce expression. It seems her true colors are starting to show. Unfazed, I replied confidently.
Because this house isn't an illegal structure.
Both of them let out a dumbfounded cry at the same time.
What?
Flustered, Rachel quickly started babbling.
But Andrew definitely said so. He told me this house was illegal.
I responded calmly.
Didn't he say if we tried to build it now? Yes, if we tried to build this house here today, it would be considered illegal. But, did you know that homes built before certain laws were passed are classified as non-conforming structures and are exempt from current laws?
Non-conforming?
An attorney would know that, right?
I suddenly turned the conversation toward the attorney.
Yes, of course.
He responded with a confident fist pump. Yeah, right. If he knew, he wouldn't be standing here. A non-conforming structure is a building that was legally constructed under old regulations but became non-compliant when laws changed later. For this house, if we were to follow current laws, it would have to be moved 6 feet behind.
So, you're aware that because this is a non-conforming structure, major renovations or remodeling can be quite difficult, right?
Yes.
He nodded vigorously, like a bobblehead. If he really knew that, then what was that whole speech earlier? It's so ridiculous it's almost funny, but I decided it was time to call him out.
By the way, Mr. Smith, are you really an attorney?
Sarah, it's not good to doubt people. We could sue you for that.
Rachel snapped at me.
That's right. I'm an attorney, and I have plenty of ways to sue you.
Mr. Smith barked.
Then, where's your bar card?
Bar card?
He flinched, his eyes blinking rapidly. Oh dear, he doesn't even know that?
Your bar card.
After a brief silence, he clapped his hands together as if he just remembered something.
Well, it's a very important item, so I left it at the office.
At this point, I was thoroughly unimpressed.
But isn't it a common practice to show the bar card to the client if they would like to validate the attorney's identity?
He was at a loss for words, so I sighed and decided to end this charade.
Well, it can't be helped. Let's have Mr. Miller bring it over.
Miller?
He's the attorney from Clover LLP. Surely you know him?
Oh yes, Miller. Of course, he's my colleague.
Colleague? That's ridiculous. Given the age difference, that's impossible. The sloppiness of this cover story is astounding.
Mr. Miller is actually the head of the firm. He's been my family's legal advisor since my father's time.
Oh.
The so-called attorney, now clearly rattled, slumped his shoulders in defeat. This is over, there's no more need to pretend.
Hey, Mr. Smith.
Yes?
As an attorney, you must know that pretending to be one without a license is a crime, right?
Oh.
With a scream like he'd seen a ghost, the fake attorney bolted out the door. He ran to the entrance, nearly tripping over himself as he fumbled with the doorknob. Rachel, who had been standing there in stunned silence, finally snapped out of it and hurried after him.
Wait, Mike!
Rachel, this isn't what you told me. You said this would be an easy job with quick money, so I agreed to help.
How could you say that? You're the one who said, leave it to me.
I overheard their argument through the intercom as they scrambled into the car. I made sure to record it. Then, I called the real Clover LLP. Later, a real attorney from Clover LLP, more outraged than I was, called the police. Both Mr. Smith and Rachel were quickly taken into custody. Since they came with an attorney from the start, the police process went smoothly. Rachel and the fake attorney didn't just get into trouble for impersonating an attorney, they also created business cards and documents, which violated both the ABA model rules of professional conduct and the Minor Offenses Act. On top of that, they were charged with fraud and arrested. Though they managed to post bail, which wasn't cheap, they have an arrest record.
I told her that the house is old, and even if we wanted to rebuild it on the same land, it would be against the law, so she should give up. I had no idea she was so obsessed.
Andrew, who had been assisting in a major surgery, learned about the whole ordeal the next morning. We had asked the police to delay informing him to avoid disturbing his work and the patients. When he heard about the commotion, his face turned pale and he hung his head.
And to top it off, she made her lover an accomplice. What a terrible choice for a wife.
Mary glared coldly at Andrew as she said, having rushed over out of concern for me. Yes, it turned out that the fake attorney was, in fact, Rachel's lover. Mike Smith was her on and off boyfriend, and they had been in and out of each other's lives for years. During one of their longer breaks, she met Andrew, started dating him, and got engaged, but as soon as she got engaged, her ex suddenly wanted her back, and she secretly resumed their affair, all while pretending to be faithful to Andrew. Apparently, Mike had been jobless and drifting around, so from her perspective, marrying Andrew, a doctor, was the more lucrative option. By the way, Mike is still unemployed.
It's not my fault. Andrew is kind and has money and a beautiful house, but Mike is fun and good-looking. Surely, you can understand, Sarah.
I don't understand.
You're impossible.
During the divorce medication, Rachel's true colors are gradually being revealed. Every time I heard about her ridiculous mindset, I almost rolled my eyes. When Andrew was told the whole story, it seems he initially couldn't accept the truth. It's understandable. His princess turned out to be rotten inside. Even Andrew, who had been blind to it all, finally woke up when he realized that his ex-wife, whom he thought was fragile and needed protection, was not only unfaithful but also saw him as nothing more than a cash cow. Apparently, she had drained the savings he had before they married, so he made sure to demand alimony and repayment of the money she had spent. Between the bail, the alimony for the affair, and the money she had to repay, the amount added up to enough to buy a brand new luxury car. Rachel and her lover, along with their parents, were pale with fear, begging repeatedly for a reduction or even reconciliation. They even suggested that they would completely break up with each other as a compromise. Well, it seems that the two did end things during this process. Even so, there was no way for them to exploit Andrew once he had woken up to reality. With the help of an excellent attorney, he set terms that they couldn't escape and won the case decisively. Rachel never apologized until the very end. With her cute appearance, she might catch another man. However, with a huge debt and an arrest record, no sensible man would go near her. 5 years later.
Hee.
What's with the weird laugh?
I'm just so happy. I'm going to be an aunt.
Hee. Yes, it's wonderful.
Mary, looking as thrilled as if she were the one pregnant, made me smile too. After the divorce, Andrew became distrustful of women and threw himself into his work. As his mother, I was a bit worried, but I figured that if his work saved lives, it wasn't a bad thing. Last year, Andrew remarried. His new wife is expecting a baby.
Who would have thought Andrew would remarry and even have a child?
And with Emily, no less. It's perfect.
Mary nodded with satisfaction, making me laugh. Yes, his new wife is none other than his childhood friend, Emily. Apparently, Emily had quietly harbored feelings for Andrew since they were in elementary school. When he was struggling after the divorce, she took him out for drinks. Thanks to that, Andrew, who had finally started to find peace, seems to have realized that there was a woman who truly cared for him all along. You've been so slow to realize, too slow, Andrew. Seeing them so happy together makes me happy too. As for the house that Rachel was so obsessed with, we decided to pass it on to my daughter a little earlier than planned. My husband had hurt his back, and the spiral staircase had become too much for him. While he will recover, these issues will only increase as we get older. So, we bought a single-story house in a convenient location where we can spend our later years. Of course, once my husband is better, we still plan to travel around the U.S. Whether Mary keeps this house as is or rebuilds it, I'm not sure. To me, the shape of the house doesn't matter. No matter what kind of house we live in, the most important thing is that our family is happy.